Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. You're also going to enjoy the next one. Oh, my goodness. But today, we're going to talk about one of those things we don't talk about much. I remember early in my unlearning and rebuilding of my faith journey, the whole idea of devotions. I remember about 25 years ago, I discovered the truth that I was a forgiven person, that Christ lived in me, and my devotional life as a senior pastor paused in the traditional way for at least a year. And and then it's come back differently. So we're going to talk about that today. How does contemplation and prayer fit into this journey of ever experiencing the goodness of God in a better, more hope-filled perspective? So let's dig in. I think you're going to really like this one. Here we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bill and Richard. It's good to have you with me again. We're having a lot of fun. The last conversation we had was timely for a number of people, and got a lot of comments about that. So thank you for that. I think the transparency that we're able to share and being honest, not one of us has an answer or the answer, but you know, the way we talk about, well, it could be this, or here's an option or lens you may not be made aware of. I think that kind of dialogue is better than that's right, this is wrong, in a sense, right? The dogmatism, which brings us to hopefully today's topic. We're just chatting through what does contemplative spiritual time look like nowadays? And I'm going to spring it off with this. Many, many, many years ago, it was like, oh, I've been at my church now for 19, and then 7 before that. So probably 26, 27 years ago, it was my first senior pastor job. And as I'm in the church, I had devotions every day, and I would come into the church early, like really early, and use the sanctuary, and no one's there, and I'm on my knees, I'm kneeled down, I got my prayer lists, and I'm doing these things, and I love Jesus for sure. But I was really trying to get God's attention, honestly. I wanted him to answer my prayers. So you got to do the jig in order to get the prayer answered, right? And so as I was doing that, everything was authentic. I meant every word I said, but I also didn't understand the darkness I was praying from. I did not know. I was praying for things I already had. And the revelation of my forgiveness was the first big wall that came down. And I was reading Classic Christianity with Bob George. And right after that, I read Grace Walk. Those two books blew my freaking mind. And it was instantly revealed Christ in me and that I was forgiven. And I was doing all these duties to kind of do the Christian thing, which then made me, I thought, okay, I don't need to do that stuff anymore. And so I stopped. I stopped, and I didn't know how tired I was from all the ritual and routine. And then it wasn't until maybe a year later that I wanted to dig in some more. I wanted to spend a little more time praying and stuff, but not the ritualistic way. So I don't know if you guys have similar stories or stuff, but how then do we, if we're growing deeper in our maturity and understanding of God's love and grace, we're going to have these ups and downs and pendulum swings. What should it look like, or what can it look like in a more mature way? So hopefully we can kind of hammer that. What do you guys think? That's good.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's more immature way, but yeah, I totally agree. Well, and maybe there's a truth to that. Maybe it's more of a childlike way into it to some degree. But no, I completely concur. I do believe as we grow in our knowledge of God's goodness, in our experience of God's blessings, that how we practice our faith. What does that mean even?
Mhm.
Prayer, contemplation,
It's a huge list. Yeah.
worship, devotion, study. We go through transitions and different periods. And I think different ones, it doesn't make any of them bad or good. I think that's one of the really clear things maybe we need to kind of articulate.
Oh, okay.
The season you were in served a purpose. And just like we have kindergarten is different than maybe elementary school, which is different than middle school, which is different than high school, which is different than college. Those experiences grow and build upon one another, but how they approach each kind of phase of learning may not always be identical. We have labs in high school. You don't have labs in kindergarten. We don't. So I think as we do grow in maturity in our faith, we do experience certain freedoms that maybe we didn't get when we were more restricted and more, needing discipline. But we also maybe also get a different appreciation for those things and do them in more like, exploratory and there's an excitement that comes with study and prayer and contemplation, whereas maybe at points in time in our adolescence or childhood, spiritually speaking, they felt more, dogmatized or religious
Duty.
or kind of obligation or
Yeah.
obligatory, whatever. So I would tend to agree. For me, I mean, mine has changed greatly over my life. I mean, I don't have some sort of very regimented thing. Some people need that. Some people appreciate that. Some people love that, where they have I get up and do the same thing every morning. And for people that are like that, I do have that in my way, but mine's just so organic. I mean, it's a lot
As
of
in
times
ground into brown beans and coffee with filtered water.
part of it is absolutely it is ground into coffee. Absolutely it is. You're not wrong. Part of it's getting a cup of coffee. And when I'm driving to work, I have some time to drive to work and just be quiet. And I have that opportunity, and I'm not necessarily, I don't have an agenda. Sometimes it's just quiet. Sometimes I'm asking for things. Sometimes I'm just embracing what is. Sometimes I'm laughing. Sometimes I'm crying. And on the weekends for me, I usually have some really dedicated times in the weekends where I get to just really be still.
Hmm.
And again, I don't have a formula to mine, but I can. It's usually before everyone else is awake, and it's me and the dog on the couch, and it's me just contemplating God's love, and really nothing more. And again, how that flows, and for me, a lot of that will end up with a writing of some sort. If you ever notice, like Saturday, sometimes it'll be a little deeper and a little more, robust. It's probably because I'm sitting on my couch and I've either read a scripture because I just feel led to that morning, or maybe something sparks me and I go, I don't like that, so I'll go try to combat it. So for me, it's very organic, but I have that liberation. But that has grown into that.
Hmm.
Wasn't always that. And so I think some of that liberty of exploration for me personally, the other one is worship has transitioned dramatically for me. I still enjoy music and I still believe that,
Okay,
worship music
back up.
has
Back up. I'm going to get you to define worship, unless you're going
what
to.
I am. Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly what I did.
All right.
So worship music, that idea that we go to church and we raise our hands and we sing and that's worship. That little box has exploded. I mean, that has value to me. I almost think it's more devotion than worship, to be semantical. The worship is everything. Everything I do where I have any cognitive awareness of God's participation with me is an act of worship. It doesn't matter if I'm washing the dishes. It doesn't matter if I'm, working with my job. It doesn't matter if we're doing this right now. When I am interacting with other reflections of God, other people, and God's in this event with us in any capacity. I've just spent 3 days at a conference in Vegas with a bunch of industry professionals. We had worship. We didn't talk once hardly about God, but we had worship because we were communing and we were interacting and we were encouraging each other and we were learning about things in our industry. And somehow, some way that is entangled into the goodness of God. And I'm going to go tailgate on Saturday with my buddies. That's going to be an act of worship. So worship is not limited to some songs by some Christian artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as I look back,
I think it's so important to not let previous wells that we dug be covered up. There are things we do learn at different stages, and sometimes we let them be covered up. I always think of Isaac. The wells. Isaac would open the wells, and then the enemies would come in and pour dirt at him, and then he'd keep going back and building them again in the same place. I think there are certain activities that are devotional and that let us kind of start off the day. That this is when I think it's just for me. That it's important for me that I align my thoughts and my heart in the morning and throughout the day. But there's so many things in the New Testament that are really synonymous, but they're said different ways. For instance, if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. So to the spirit rather than so to the flesh. The concept of tithing. All of this, which tithe isn't really about your money. Tithe is about your first and best thought. Your first best thought. That's what the tithe really is in the spirit realm. It's thinking of God first and opening yourself to awareness of Him. He's That's already right. there in everything we do, but it's all about awareness of His presence. And there are things like making melody in your heart. When our hearts make melody, it's like a swizzle stick, and it's like we stir the good elements up to the top of our consciousness. And sometimes when we don't have devotional, and I don't even like the word practice, it's just devotional activity. Sediment, the good things, the good thoughts, the virtuous thoughts, the best thoughts, the things we know so well kind of sink down to the bottom, and they're not up at the top of our consciousness. So I always like to visualize it as sort of a swizzle stick. Devotions are forms of swizzle sticks where we mix our being with His being, where there's a blending going on. And I remember I wrote a short little devotional one time about devotions. And there were three, I called it the special K breakfast. And there were 3 K words, Greek and Hebrew words or Hebrew words that were used. And if you don't mind me sharing them, I'd like to share them because I think they're really good dynamics to keep. One is kavana, Kavanah. And that is a word that the Hebrews would use to describe wholehearted concentration. And what they would say is that whenever we're being intentional with our receptivity, kind of entering into the receptive stage with the Lord, that our hearts are to be wholehearted concentration, as if we are talking to God face to face, as if His face is opposite to our face. So that our prayers don't become rote, they don't become mechanical, because we're actually using our imagination, our spiritual imagination, to imagine that which is already real, which is God is face to face across from us. I remember the fellow I first met, my spiritual dad, Dewey Hammond. He was the first person I ever met that I said, this guy talks about God like He's real. There was just like he had encountered Him. And so kavana is just a heart prep where we enter into it not with the striving, but we enter into it with that a German word we've talked about before, Gelassenheit, Gelassenheit, where we just receive the Lord, but we do set our heart on it. We set our heart on the Spirit. We set our heart on the virtues of God, on the love of God, on the wisdom of God. So kavana is wholehearted concentration. I remember when I used to confess scriptures every day, and I still confess scriptures time to time. I think about them quite a bit because that's kind of how I process things. Like scripture will come to mind. But I try to always check my heart for kavana, that I'm saying these scriptures. I really believe them. I really believe these scriptures, the ones I've chosen to focus on, the ones I've chosen that I believe describe His goodness the most. I love them. And then when I sing songs, and I'm a horrible singer, but you know what? I don't sing for anybody else. I sing for me. I sing for the Lord. I play for an audience.
Sing in the shower an awful lot. Yeah.
Well, I'm told that you have beta waves, or whatever in the shower, and that's a good place to do that. But it's making melody. It's making melody in your heart. That's a real thing, and they talk about singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to each other. It's a beautiful thing. But Kavana is just a way, sort of our attitude as we enter into the thing of just being single-eyed. This time is for the Lord. I'm putting the Lord first. I remember I got in a bad habit of listening to fantasy football things first thing in the morning. I don't even know how I got it, other than I'm real competitive in my fantasy football leagues. But I realized that my heart had dried, and that the mornings were meant for the Lord. And I've reinstituted the preeminence idea of tithing to the Lord when I get up. Not tithing money or even tithing effort, just tithing priority. My first best attention of the day, I'm intentionally presenting it to the Lord, knowing that He's helping me do even that. But it's just opening the pores of my being to it. So that's what Kavana is. So that's one K word. The second K word is a word that means well, it's kairos, but it's God's way of doing time, and that God doesn't do time by the wristwatch. He does it by events. It's all about the event, having an event with God. He's not keeping one eye. It's not linear. But when he looks back, and really the Hebrews are this way with their history, that they're not giving you history. They're not giving you any kind of linear history. They're measuring everything by events. That's how they picture everything, how they remember everything, how they honor everything through events. So to look at our devotional time as an event. I'm not doing it so I'll do better throughout the day, even though that's a benefit of it. I'm not doing it for any other reason than spending some one-on-one time in a conscious, aware way, in which I'm stirring myself up and letting the Lord stir me up. So that's that. And then the third K is kainos. Kainos. That's a Greek word. It means it's newness. So newness, nearness, and nowness. Those are really what these three words mean. Newness, nearness, and nowness. And that's just bringing into the moment. One thing my relationship with Heather has taught me is she always pulls me into the moment. I'm always looking to the next moment. I'm always in expectation about what's happening next and after that, and then this and that day. On the way to work, what's that after I get there? And I'm such a fast thinker. She's excellent at just pulling me back into the moment and being aware here and now. And that's a wonderful thing. And I'm saying that, and the Lord is really that way too. He wants to pull us into the today, here, and now. And there are songs to be sung and harmonies to be heard. And I noticed this one thing that I realized the other day, the Lord doesn't speak in a loud voice. He whispers a lot. That He whispers to us. And I was thinking, why whisper? And I felt like what came to me was that when the person that you're in a love relationship with whispers to you, you listen more carefully, because you have to bend your ear and you have to pay more attention. And I think I like this idea with the Lord, that we're wanting a lightning thing across the sky. Tell me, oh Lord, tell me thy word, all this kind of stuff. Well, He's whispering to us, but if we kind of hunker down, and I'm not saying get tense about it, but I'm just saying He's speaking to us all the time in whispered tones of love and joy and peace, and to learn to listen deep, and because that voice is in us. So anyway, it's all about hearing the Lord, about stirring up our senses, our sensibilities, and our senses, and training them in righteousness, which is just, hey, this is the love of our life. The Lord is the love of our life. And if we if we're not paying attention, is He still there with us? Sure. Does He still love us? Yes. Do we still hear Him on the go? Yes. But it's the devotion is about just stimulating and appreciating this relationship we have, and sort of setting the plumb line for the day. And that's what the tithe is to me. I know people hate the tithe, and they should, based on how it's been defined.
Yeah, the law of
version. When we look at it, it's just, I'm sowing to the Spirit. When I'm tithing, I'm sowing my heart to God, and because He sowed it first to us, and it's Him sowing it to us that even lets me sow it back and give Him the first fruits of it. And the first fruit is nothing other than our first and best thought, our first and best attention, our first and best prayer. And I'm speaking throughout the day, but mainly in the morning. So anyway, that's sort of where I'm at with it.
Wow. I love that. Because otherwise, the reaction that I have heard and seen by many who are, I hate to use the word deconstructing, but it's still a legit word. But there are folks just beginning a deconstruction journey of unlearning and questioning, and they're in crisis mode, and they think, oh, I felt so obligated to so many things. I'm quitting the church. I'm quitting all giving. I'm just going to take care of myself. I'm not connecting with people. All these things, they just cut them off. And sometimes they need to do that for their own sake and they don't know it. But it's like that well. You plug up the well, then you got to go back because maybe you have a different maturity now. You can go and receive what's in that well differently now. Right.
Yeah.
But the foundation's there. Like we keep, and again, part of that process is even people being angry at their past religious experiences and people and are angry at them for being legalist, being this or two-faced or whatever you want to call them. And they get anger that comes. And I'm thinking, man, you got some healing still to do because I recognize that. And I only saw it through someone else being a jerk. I went, oh,
Yeah.
I'm angry at that because I actually resemble that. Huh. And it makes me want to fall down before God and say, and however you do it, right? And say, God, please keep changing my heart, keep filling my motives with you. I would love for God to just take over, but that's not how God works. This is a relationship, and the union is how God takes over, but he doesn't take over and control. This is a willing, flowing love relationship. And sometimes I forget about God because I'm in autopilot because I know what I got to do. And I like your idea of the first fruits of your intentions and day, give them in that time to the Lord in whatever way you want, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's going fishing, whether it's reading your Bible, whether it's actually praying or contemplating and meditating, like doing those practices that tell your body to do something it's not used to.
Yeah, amen.
I think another aspect of this, and you guys have both touched on it, and I did too, maybe indirectly, is humanity, people that we, I think, associate with, know, and who are going through this, reevaluation of their faith or kind of understanding things from new angles. We tend to be really, really quick on the trigger when it comes to language. And Richard, this is something you've said where language is flexible. Language is not like if we try to make words rigid around some sort of, so the word devotion, the word worship, prayer, tithe, these can be so like almost triggering to people just because they've heard them in a very narrow context.
They become unmotivational.
Yeah, and the reality is these words are just merely buds that can flower into so many things beyond maybe the single thing that institutionalism kind of tried to box them into. I think maybe the three of us are kind of saying the same thing in that, what you learn there, if you just take it and throw it away, you'll never get to see what it can just absolutely sprout into so much bigger. Whether, again, I grew up in a family of musicians. Music is huge. It's a massive part of my joy in life. I love music, but to limit music into this one narrow band and say this is the only thing that's worshipful is really tragic. You could listen to pop music or jazz music or classical music, and you will experience God, right?
Especially if you're looking for it.
Especially if you start looking for it. And this is the first fruits that you're talking about. This is the quote unquote tithe that you're talking about when we are experiencing anything. And if we start our day that way, we just tend, it's kind of like working out in the morning. I got to be careful because I've been really bad about that. But when I used to work out in the morning, my whole day would have energy, right? It's very similar with our spirit muscles. Like if we start the momentum and we start the metabolism of our spirit in the beginning of the day, we catch on to finding those things all throughout the rest of the day. But if we kind of lag there, then you may not experience it the same way. And again, this isn't necessarily a good or a bad conversation. This is about quality. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And how can we experience love, agape, in our interactions with us in spirit alone, with us in spirit and others, collectively, individually, corporately. And I do like that. What'd you say? Now, near,
New.
new. Yeah, I like that. That now, near, new. Those are three really, really good words. And I think that's what, if we can kind of spark that at the beginning of our day when we awaken to the new mercies. There's the new, all right? The new mercies every day. If we start to think, what new mercies am I going to see today? That's the question we kind of start with. I can really inspire
and
us.
it's a recognition. Those things are already present, like we said.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's all about recognition of nearness, nowness, and newness. And I would say, for me to put it at its most basic form, Bill, I think you said it like children. Didn't you say like children earlier?
Yeah,
kind of being
like we almost become immature. Yeah.
But I don't have a musical bone in my body naturally, but I started writing songs back around 2007 through 2010, and they were mostly bathroom songs for me. In fact, they all were. But they were.
You play them on the trumpet? Oh.
And
I was thinking that. Oh, anyway.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Well, but my way of writing a song is just a melody just comes to me, and then I start using my imagination to put words into it. And listen, they're not works of art, but they were works of my heart. They're not works of art, but they're works of my heart. And I sang those throughout the day. And I've got to tell you, I was making melody in my heart. And that's what my wish for everyone is, that because a lot of people's Christianity doesn't appear to have a melody to it. There's a lilting melody, a subtext that you can even hear in the spirit. But then in 2010, I went through a personal devastation, and like Leonard Cohen said, my hallelujah got fractured, and I stopped singing. I lost melody in my heart. I lost it for several years. And what's been so blessed for me over the last 2 or 3 months is I've gotten melody in my heart back. It's never that I wasn't with the Lord during the times I didn't have the melody in my heart, but I wasn't hitting on that particular important, vital area. And what's so amazing is that these songs are coming back to me now. I've got them, of course, recorded here and there and back, but they're coming back to me in the morning. And I'm singing the morning songs again. And so, I mean, I'm not, all I can tell you is that there is a musical aspect to this, and Bill knows more. He has forgotten more than I'll ever know about music. But I can say, when all you got to do is just hum, just hum. And just speak kindness toward the Lord, from the Lord, about the Lord, into the Lord. Let him just work in your imagination and give you juicy phrases. And just, even if you only come up with a chorus, with just a 2 or 3 line chorus, that type of thing. There's something to making melody with the Lord that's magical. And I'm not talking about in a institutional format. I'm talking about personal. This, everything that I'm talking about, and I think y'all too, this is private. This is between you and the Lord. And it's no one else can fill that space but you and the Lord. Now others can join and we can have a corporate space, sure. But just that we each have our own melody and find our melody. It's part of our name. It's part of our nature, part of who we are. A true symphony,
the beauty of it is people aren't playing the same part. We're not all playing the same instrument. We're not all playing the same, even if we are the same instrument, we're playing.
I'm the triangle. I got the triangle.
But you're right. And so once you pick up on that, you can find your own contribution to the symphony that God is corporately playing in all things. And that's part of this whole conversation, is how do we wake up and kind of, you almost have to hear the conductor, right? You were saying the whisper. We gotta sense the where's the rhythm today, and then we get to play that. And it's an organic thing. I think that's part of the hard part of this, is if we try to make this structured, we can absolutely do that at periods of time and get wonderful experiences of growth and learning out of the structured aspects of it. But we gotta have that leading to something that's organic. And what I think we tend to do as humanity and collectives, especially, is we try to take organic and make it organized. And that's the opposite. our growth in all of this is supposed to go from organic or organized to organic. So I don't know if that helps anyone who's listening, but if you feel trodden and process oriented and just kind of institutionalized, chances are you've outgrown the organizational aspects of your growth, of your worship or devotion or whatever this is. And it's probably time to try and find an organic thing, but don't think that those rhythms, don't think that those notes, don't think that the organization that you learn doesn't hold value. And I think that's the well metaphor. Those wells are still fruitful for what they were trying to give you building block wise.
Amen.
I'm surprised that devotion comes to me instead of me trying to do devotion sometimes. Sometimes in the morning when I'm driving into work, and depending what season of the year, I see this stunning sunrise on my left. And my first reaction is, wow, thank you, God. Or you're really good at this. Like it's so, and I want to stop and take pictures, and I have a lot of pictures, but I've stopped taking pictures because it's not about capturing it with a camera. My soul needs to capture it. And it almost gives like a fuel for the day, a calmness for anxieties. It's crazy how that works. I'm experiencing this at funerals now, where I hear a song that you would not normally hear, because I've heard all the hymns. They usually don't touch me as much. Although my past hymns and choruses and stuff that I used to sing, I know some people are vehemently against them. They hate them. They say that, but I think that's just, I'm going to just presume that's hurt speaking from a system that's burned you. But I still find comfort in some of those words and even the tunes, but then the lyrics suck because they're like awful theologies. Like, oh man, but I love this song. Come on. So it's been difficult, but here's 3 songs that have blown me away in the last little while. There's a song called "When I Get to Where I'm Going" by Brad Paisley and Dolly Parton. If you haven't heard
that at my dad's funeral.
Oh my goodness, it is a powerful song. In fact, the first time I heard it, the musician, house musician at the funeral home I work at or help at, he says, "Hey, I got this new song I want to play for you," and I just watched Narnia the night before. And so here's this song about landing beside a lion, run my fingers through his mane. Perhaps then I'll learn what it's like to ride a drop of rain. And it's just the comfort of being around and don't cry for me down here. When I get to where I'm going, don't cry for me down here. That's kind of what that one's about. Then another one, a Willie Nelson song of all things. Something You Get Through. Oh my goodness. If you've not heard it, go look it up and listen. You're gonna choke up. It is a powerful song. Here's an aged man singing a contemplative song that hits, I think, every single person in a different way. If you don't like country or you hate it, at least listen to the words and you'll be blown away. It's a good one. And the last one, James Blunt. Monster.
I started to listen to that earlier, but my YouTube thing went up. I heard the first couple of lines. It was beautiful.
Oh, it's more than that. You guys see the whole thing, because it's not just the words. You're going to get sucked into the emotion of it. And so as I'm doing some of these funerals and the songs people are choosing, I'm hearing songs I've never heard before, or I'm hearing them differently and have the sense of love and compassion for the family. And I thought, this is worship. This is worship in the experience of seeing and feeling the hurts and needs of others. But we don't talk about that in the idea of worship. So maybe worship the definition we've had is so small and so limited that
it can be.
Yeah. And it's not just one thing. So I try to correct things on Sunday mornings here and I don't say we're going to now worship. I say we're going to worship through listening. We're going to worship through giving. We're going to worship through music. We're going to worship through having coffee, right? So we have to retrain. Go ahead.
What's interesting is we've talked some about Jack Derrida before. He came up with something called deconstruction, but it's about deconstruction of language with the whole idea that we recognize the limitations of language. I think Bill was talking about that earlier. But here's what's cool about it. He said, no matter what term you use to describe anything, it will fall short. And what he said is that there would be a remainder, like in math, a remainder. There's something left over that it didn't capture.
That's
And
right.
even on your best day, your best definition of grace, of worship, of any of this
Always
stuff,
fall
there
short.
were always a remainder. But once we realize that, then that loosens its grip on us, and
That's right.
we lose the tension. Then it doesn't matter. I can use grace one way, one day, another day, use as many different words. The tithe, sowing to the Spirit, being single-eyed, setting your heart on the Lord, loving the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind. There's always a remainder as to what these things mean, because they are, like Bill said, organic, continually pulsating, but protean. That's one of my favorite words, protein, like a cell wall, just always moving in that. So I really like the idea of one thing that this devotional stuff does. We get too addicted to language. So we say, well, am I doing this devotional thing? Well, devotional thing has a remainder left over.
That's
it can
right.
mean something perfect to you and helpful to you one day, and the next day the same word starts putting obligations on you and
That's right.
and pressure on you, and that's not the same word that I was hearing yesterday. But if we can just let loose of our grip on language and just realize that love, when Paul talks about the length, that we may know the length, width, depth, and height, there ain't no way we're ever going to put that into language. And it's rough at best, it's vague and distant at best, and sketchy at best, and hazy at best. We see through a glass dimly at best, but hallelujah, we do see. We do see, and what we do see, we affirm, and then we get back to the child thing, where we just trying to find a melody to live by, a melody in our heart that's sweet and kind, and listening to the whispers of God and the tenderness of God, and letting His tenderness minister to us. I know that's one big thing for devotional for me, that even though I'm opening myself to the Lord, I know that I feel His tenderness, and it makes me tender. Because when I walk as a lawyer, when I walk out, I'm like a Ronin, with a sword. I've got to go forth and do that. And then for me to do that in the Spirit and in tenderness means I need a lot of angelic intervention and a lot of wisdom. And it's so, I hate myself and I hate my occupation when we have to come across as anything other than tender. And sometimes we do, and that's another situation. But I'm just saying, the tenderness, it's the tenderness of tone that we present. That anything more than that is we're striking the rock, with our own anger, and we're misrepresenting the nature of God. So part of this devotional thing, this is good. I've never thought of this, but I mean, is that we walk in and we find resonance with the nature of God. The purpose of devotion is that we find resonance with His tenderness and with His kindness, and then it's like He's our tuning fork, and He tunes us. Through these devotional exercises, He tunes us, and then we go out and we're in the right spirit.
Is it possible that Jesus was like the picture of devotions, where He was always devotional, like constantly, always in touch with His Father, but He still went and had extra quiet time,
Yes,
like away from the busyness? Is there something to that, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he shows us that in His humanity, we need both. We need community, but sometimes we just also need to get one-on-one. And what is that? When I say one-on-one, maybe it's just one. We just need to get one. We just need to get one. Like, we need to just be and reflect on God and goodness, and whether that's through, every person's unique. Some people may be pure meditation, some people may be painting, some maybe people singing, but where you are just literally in your essence of being, in the now, in the new, in the near. And then there's other times where we just need to commune, and we need to experience giving love and receiving love in a very active and engaged, community type of way. And all of these can be hijacked. Every one of them, we also have to be very aware that every one of these can be hijacked and turned into something that it was not intended. Both, I think, are essential to our humanity, to our essence of humanity. And Jesus models that for us. Absolutely.
So what do you think are some of the hindrances to be able to practice or experience what we've been talking about just now? Because I think there's some obvious ones, but I think it's going to be important to say some of them, because people may recognize, oh, yeah, that's why I'm having a hard time. What do you think are some major hindrances?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This isn't exactly that, but I mean, Heather had this thought the other day. is that we're trained to think, when you sow to the flesh, you reap. Sowing and reaping. She was looking at this through sowing and reaping. When we sow the flesh, we reap with the flesh, but we normally think of sowing to the flesh by doing some activity that's carnal. But so then that gets us subtly tricked into thinking, well, sowing to the spirit means I'm doing some good act, like I'm doing a good act. So if I do this good act, it'll reap spirit. But that misses the boat. We sow to the spirit through these devotional exercises by loving the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and might, by focusing on His light. And then we sow, but what we reap are then the actions that we're talking about. The actions of kindness, of loving others, and healing. Like the Hebrews,
they become the effortless responses. Yes.
But they're from Him.
Correct.
So what we've sown, but we get tricked into thinking I've got to do something. I've got to go. And even with these activities, if we're not careful, these activities become things. We've got to do these. We've got to do these things so that then I'll reap spiritual things because I do these things. There's no causation. We're out of the causation loop in the spirit.
Yeah.
We do these things because God is love, and because to focus on.
We move out of causation and we move into flow. Yeah.
Yes. Well said.
And it's for our benefit.
Yes.
All of this is
another one we already talked about is language. Just getting hung up on language, and then language becomes a trap. We already mentioned that one. I think another one that I would contend is that we can be sensitive, because I think there is an element to this. Again, I don't want to over dig myself into a trap, but we can over plan, because that takes the now out of the equation, right? I'm going to go have worship at this time, or if we try to plan or regiment things and we're not open for the opportunity to experience newness at 9 p.m. at night, when we traditionally do it in the morning, and there's a value doing it in the morning, but that we're not, when can we, it's anticipating without expecting.
So I think that's almost a mark of maturity rather than the beginning. I think some folks.
I agree, but I think it's also what you're saying, traps. So it's a trap to become overly expectant. We want to always be anticipating, but like if we're expecting it to happen, if we're not careful, we're putting ourselves in the wrong frame of mind.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that some folks will hear that there is room for some of those planned practices on the front end as a tutor.
Absolutely. I don't want to say that. That's what I said. I don't want to box myself in two.
No, you didn't. Not at all. Because I know in my mind, in my personality, I get really busy. So my routines end up taking over my day. I don't think it ever happens to anyone else, but at least it does to me. But I learned something powerful through the fire department. When they go through some traumatic events, they have debriefings, usually after a major call. And some of the firefighters are pretty anxious and PTSD triggered type stuff. And they've given out these devices called a Muse, M-U-S-E. And it's a band that goes over your forehead and back behind your ears, and it can read your brain waves and what's going on. You use an app, and it's the practice of being still. It's hard to do, like, because it'll tell you in the app as, okay, slow down. Like if you have this bird chirping noise in the background, but if your brain you're not focusing, it gets really loud. I mean, you got to calm, and it gets really relaxed. It's just, it's training you to. And a couple of the firefighters don't need them anymore because they now learned the practice of calming and reflecting. And I thought, man, this is the world that's not dealing with spiritual stuff, learning these things. And here, believers don't have a clue how to find calmness and stillness in anxiousness. And I thought, wow. So if you need a resource temporarily,
that's at elementary school. So that's going back to those wells, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's where I don't want to say that the principles don't have value. They absolutely do.
But in your anger, we throw them out. Right.
But just like Richard said, it's when those principles become the causations.
Yeah.
That's when we've kind of inverted the entire.
That's brilliant.
Perspective of this.
I probably shared this before, but when I was in seminary, the one thing I learned in Bible precept class, everything else I hated. But the one thing I learned was this concept of distinguishing, it's a logic argument, but of distinguishing instrumentality. That because something is an instrument doesn't mean it's the source of the thing. So instrumentality would say that a song is not worship, but a song is an instrument for you to worship. So what we confuse the instrument with the thing itself. We think the instrument is the thing, and so that with even the Bible, we would think it is the thing. So we worship the thing,
Yep.
and we think the power comes from the Bible when it doesn't. It's an instrument. But I've always been struck that it said David would create instrument after instrument after instrument after instrument. He continually built new instruments and wrote new songs. And I just think that's magnificent because he saw the instrumentality. Yesterday's instrument can become tomorrow's ritual,
Yeah.
So
you don't even know it.
Yeah, and you don't even realize it. And then you fall into that rut, which you were saying, Mike, about the rut. That's what, really, if the whole purpose of devotional is to keep yourself out of the rut. To whatever rut you may have momentarily slipped into yesterday on some level, it's a way of flattening the ruts out so that we reacquire newness, nearness, and nowness, of just complete freedom as sons of children of God, that we can go in any direction and we're not going to be brain trapped that we've got to do this particular sequence of events and instruments or our lives are going to end. I'm so tired of hearing people tell other Christians, your life is at an end because of this mistake or because of that mistake, or don't go that way, brother, or your life will be destroyed. How dare you tell somebody that? There's life. God is bigger than all these things. He's on every side of every person. He wants everyone to succeed and to find Zion's peak from where they're at. And for us to tell people that they have to go in a rut if they don't follow this particular rut, so when we eliminate our own ruts, then we don't pull other people into ruts, and maybe we can all just eliminate, like Jesus flatten all the valleys, put the hill, flatten all the valleys and the mountains and all that, and bring it all into an even place. It's a good place. In an even place where we can walk in freedom and arm and not have to worry about all of the things the cares of the world, that weigh us down.
Well, we're not judging each other, then we have time to love each other.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
this was last week.
Yes,
that was last week.
That was really good. That was so good. Well, our time's up. That was really good and helpful. I'm going to look forward to it. Again, I benefit rehearing it when it goes live because I'm listening to it live as it's airing, and I get so much more out of the conversation. But this was really good. Maybe we can continue to look at some other topics as we go. Who knows? All right. Thanks, guys. We'll look forward to our next conversation. Wow, that was good. Hey, did you catch that phrase? Now, I put a comment in the comment section just now. Something about Bill Thrasher said something that caught my attention. I actually put it on my calendar and kept moving it forward because I wanted to remember this. But he said, working with other reflections of God. I thought, oh my goodness, that's so true. To learn that everyone we look at, everyone, the ones we're angry with, the ones who cut you off on the highway, the ones who cut in front of you in the line in the grocery store, the one who's really irritated, they're all reflections of God, not necessarily expressing the reflection of God, but wow. Anyway, I thought that was really good. I hope you enjoyed that. I think you're going to enjoy next week's as well. And I think you're going to, because I'm going to introduce 2 new people at that point that I've gotten to know, and I think it's going to be really meaningful. So until next week, have a great week. Thank you for watching Still Growing in Grace. See ya.
Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.